She was 6 months pregnant, clipping coupons and buying baby clothes from thrift stores, while her husband secretly collected $50,000 every single month from her inheritance. But here's the twist she never saw coming. The day her husband shoved her in the middle of a crowded bank lobby, she accidentally uncovered a fortune worth $2.7 trillion, a family who had been searching for her for 20 years, and the terrifying truth that she might be husband number 3 on a killer's list. What would you do if you discovered your entire marriage was a calculated scheme and the man sleeping next to you had already made 2 other wives disappear? This is not just another story about a cheating husband. This is about a woman who went from feeling worthless and trapped to becoming one of the most powerful forces for change in America. And the most shocking part? The cruelest moment of her life became the key that unlocked everything she was meant to be. Before we begin, remember this. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is exactly what sets you free. This story will show you that your value is never determined by someone who tries to control you, and that it's never too late to discover who you really are. If you've ever felt stuck, underestimated, or invisible in your own life, stay until the end. Sarah's journey might just change how you see your own. Now let's begin. The sharp click of high heels on marble filled the spotless lobby of Metropolitan Trust Bank. Sarah Mitchell shifted her purse strap, her other hand instinctively covering her 6-month pregnant stomach. In front of her, the platinum banking area shone with polished brass and dark mahogany, a clear signal of old money and private dealings. A security guard stepped forward. "Excuse me, miss, but this section is for our premium clients," he stated, his tone polite but routine, as if he said it 100 times a day. Sarah felt a flush of heat creep up her neck. "I have an appointment with the manager regarding my husband's business accounts. His name is Richard Mitchell from TechFlow Dynamics." The guard's demeanor changed in an instant. "Oh, Mr. Mitchell. Of course, ma'am. Please follow me." Sarah's mind was racing as she followed the guard toward the executive offices. Her entire world had been turned upside down just 3 weeks earlier. She had found out that Richard, her husband of 8 years and a successful chief executive officer, was hiding a fortune from her. He claimed they could not even afford new furniture for the baby's room, yet he was managing several business accounts she had never known existed. It was a complete accident. Her phone had died, so she used his laptop to order some groceries and saw the bank statements in his email. The numbers she saw, the huge deposits and transfers, made her feel dizzy. For years, her husband had told her they were barely getting by on his large salary, and it was all a lie. "Mrs. Mitchell," the guard said, interrupting her thoughts, "the manager's office is right there. Are you certain you do not want to wait for your husband?" But before Sarah could say a word, the front doors of the bank flew open with a bang. Richard Mitchell marched across the marble floor with such power that people stopped to watch. His expensive suit was flawless, and his jaw was tight with an anger Sarah knew all too well. "Sarah," he called out, his voice sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. "What in the world are you doing here?" Suddenly, everyone in the bank was looking at them. Sarah's face grew hot, with a mixture of shame and fury. "I am trying to figure out why you have 3 secret business accounts, but you told me we could not buy a crib for our baby." In just 3 steps, Richard was standing over her, his tall frame making her feel small. At 6'2", he used his height to intimidate people, and it was working. "You have no business looking into my private finances." "Your private finances?" Sarah's voice got louder, though she tried to keep it down. "We are supposed to be a team, Richard. We are supposed to be partners," she repeated. "Keep your voice down," Richard hissed, looking around at the people who were now openly staring. "You are making a scene. I am making a scene. The words escaped her, louder than she meant. You have been lying about our money for years, and you think I am the one causing a problem? Do not tell me what to do. Richard's voice snapped through the quiet bank. Richard, please, not here. Can we just... I said, do not tell me what to do. It happened in a flash. So quickly, Sarah barely saw it coming. Richard shoved her shoulder, pushing her back much harder than he needed to. Unsteady on her feet, her pregnant body lurched backward. She reached out and grabbed a nearby pillar to keep from falling. Her heart pounding in her chest from the shock of it all. She was stunned by what he had done. Her own husband had just pushed her in a public place while she was carrying their child. Is there an issue here? A deep, commanding voice suddenly broke the tension. The quiet authority in his words made the entire lobby go silent. Sarah looked up and saw a man coming out of the executive offices. He was tall with silver hair, wearing a charcoal suit that looked incredibly expensive. This was James Wellington, the manager of the bank's Platinum Division for the last 15 years, and he had never witnessed a scene like this one. When his eyes met Sarah's, a strange look crossed his face. Maybe he recognized her, or perhaps he was just confused. Something about her seemed familiar, and it gave him a strange feeling he could not identify. There is no problem, Richard answered immediately. His voice completely changed, becoming smooth and professional, like when he spoke to clients. It is just a small disagreement between husband and wife. A disagreement? Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. You pushed me. I hardly touched you, Richard snapped back. You always overreact. James Wellington moved closer, his sharp eyes observing everything. He saw the pregnant woman holding onto the pillar, the angry man in the fancy suit, and the customers who were trying not to watch. After 15 years in his job, he had learned to read situations well, and this one felt all wrong. Why do not we move this discussion into my office? James offered, but the way he said it made it sound like an order. All of us? Richard's confident attitude started to crack. He obviously did not expect the manager of the bank to step in. That is not necessary, Richard said. We are leaving now. Actually, Sarah spoke up, her confidence returning. I came here to talk to you. I need to ask some questions about my husband's bank accounts. Sarah? Richard said, in a low, threatening voice. No, Richard. I am tired of pretending that everything is okay. James observed their conversation with a mix of curiosity and worry. The woman, Sarah, was clearly upset, but she also had a surprising amount of strength that he admired, and there was still that strange feeling about her that he could not place. Mrs. Mitchell, James said gently, please come into my office. I am confident we can get this figured out. As he led the way, James could not help but study the side of Sarah's face. Her nose, her jawline, and even the way she stood tall while being pregnant and distressed. It all sparked a distant memory he could not quite bring into focus. 3 hours later, Sarah was sitting in her car in the bank's parking lot. Her hands were trembling as she thought about what the manager had said. James Wellington had been professional and kind. He was surprisingly understanding. He told her he was not allowed to share specific details about the accounts, but he did confirm that Richard had multiple business accounts holding a lot of money. But that was not the reason her hands were shaking. It was the look on James's face. When she wrote down her maiden name on a form, he had turned pale and asked her, very quietly, was your mother's name Elizabeth Wellington? How on earth could he have known her mother's name? Sarah thought about the question that had been bothering her for weeks, ever since she found out about Richard's secret money. What do you do when you find out your husband is a stranger? What happens when you learn that your whole life has been a lie? As she turned the key in the ignition, Sarah knew what she had to do. She needed to learn more about James Wellington and figure out why hearing her mother's name shocked him so much. She had a strong feeling that this awful, confusing, and pivotal day was only the start of something much bigger. The sky finally opened up, and rain began to pour down as Sarah drove away. The raindrops on the windshield were like the tears she refused to let fall. Her phone rang through the car's speakers, showing her sister Emma's name on the screen. "Hello, Em." She tried to sound normal when she answered the call. "Sarah?" "Honey, you do not sound okay. What is wrong?" Emma Mitchell could always tell when her older sister was upset, even just by the sound of her voice. "Richard shoved me at the bank today. He did it in front of a crowd of people." There was a long pause on the phone. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was full of rage. "He did what?" "Sarah, that is a crime, especially since you are pregnant. Please tell me you called the police." I did not call the police," Sarah said as she pulled into her driveway. She saw that Richard was not home yet. But something else happened. Something really weird. "What do you mean, weird?" Sarah shut off the car and sat in the dark garage. "The manager of the bank is named James Wellington. When I told him Mom's last name, he looked completely shocked, Em. I have a feeling he knew her." "That cannot be true," Emma replied right away. "You remember what Dad told us after Mom passed away? Her family wanted us out of their lives. They thought he stole her from their wealthy and privileged world." Sarah had grown up hearing that same story over and over. Her father, David Mitchell, was an insurance salesman from a modest background. He met and fell in love with Elizabeth Wellington at a fancy event in Boston. The story went that Elizabeth's rich family cut her off completely when she chose to marry him. After she died of cancer when Sarah was 12 and Emma was 9, the family still refused to have anything to do with her children. But what if Dad was not telling the whole truth? Sarah wondered aloud. What if there is another side to that story? At that same moment, 15 miles away, James Wellington sat in his large office at the Metropolitan Trust Bank. The phone call James Wellington was making would alter the course of his life. "Marcus, it's James. I need a full background check on someone." "Yes, right away." For over 10 years, Marcus Rodriguez had served as James's trusted private investigator, managing everything from corporate investigations to personal security for the bank's most important clients. "What is the name?" Marcus asked. "Richard Mitchell, the CEO of TechFlow Dynamics, but I am more focused on his wife, Sarah. Her maiden name was Sarah Catherine Wellington." "Wellington? Is she any relation to you?" James gazed at a photograph on his desk, a faded picture of him and his sister Elizabeth at her wedding 25 years ago. Elizabeth had looked breathtaking in her simple white gown, her hand held by a man James had never trusted. David Mitchell had appeared to be a decent man, but there was always something about him that just did not sit right with James. Perhaps it was how quickly he had charmed Elizabeth, or how eager he seemed to move her far away from Boston and her family. "That is a possibility," James said softly. "Send me absolutely everything you can find. I want the family history, financial records, and even medical records, if you can obtain them legally. I have to know if this woman is the person I believe she is." After ending the call, James opened a drawer in his desk and took out a small wooden box he had not touched in years. Tucked inside, wrapped in soft tissue paper, was a piece of jewelry. It was a delicate gold locket, engraved with the Wellington family crest on the front. He had purchased it for Elizabeth's daughter, whoever she might be, many years ago, a gift for a niece he believed he would never meet. Meanwhile, in her own kitchen, Sarah was having a very similar conversation with her sister Emma, who had rushed over the moment she heard about the trouble at the bank. "You never bring up Mom's side of the family," Emma said, placing 2 mugs of tea on the table. Maybe it is time you started asking some questions. You already know why I do not talk about them, Sarah answered. After Mom died when we were children, Dad told us her family wanted nothing to do with us. He claimed they held him responsible for taking her away from their wealth. But what if he wasn't telling the truth? The question lingered in the air between them. Emma had always been the more skeptical of the two sisters, the one to challenge what she was told and to dig for answers when things seemed off. Sarah had always been the one to keep the peace, accepting what she was told and trying to make things work. Why would Dad lie about something so important? Sarah asked. Maybe he did it because he was ashamed. Emma proposed. Just think about it, Sarah. Mom's family was wealthy, right? I mean, they had real money. What if they offered to help after she passed away? And Dad was too proud to take their help. What if he was the one who told them to stay away because he could not bear being treated like a charity project? Sarah thought about this possibility. Their father had always been a man of great pride, sometimes to his own detriment. He had worked 2 different jobs to make sure they lived in a good neighborhood after their mother was gone, and he refused assistance from anyone. She had always looked up to him for his independence, but now she wondered if there was a darker element to it. There is only one way to find the truth, Emma stated firmly. You have to go back to that bank and speak with James Wellington. If he knew Mom, he might have the answers you need. That evening, as Sarah was settling in for what she expected to be a quiet night by herself, her phone buzzed with a number she did not recognize. Mrs. Mitchell, my name is James Wellington from Metropolitan Trust Bank. I believe we should have a conversation. Sarah's heart started to pound in her chest. Is this about my husband's accounts? I do not know what else there is to say. Not regarding your husband's accounts, James said, choosing his words carefully, but about yours. Mine? I do not have any accounts with your bank. Mrs. Mitchell, would you be free to meet with me tomorrow morning? There are some family issues we should discuss, issues that concern your mother. Sarah clutched the phone more tightly. My mother passed away more than 20 years ago. What could you possibly know about my family's issues? Your mother was Elizabeth Wellington, was she not? The question felt like a physical shock to Sarah. How did you know that? Who are you? I am someone who has been searching for you for a very long time. James spoke in a gentle voice. Please, Mrs. Mitchell, just give me 1 hour of your time tomorrow morning. I can assure you that you will want to hear what I have to tell you. After she hung up the phone, Sarah sat alone in her quiet house. Richard still had not come home from wherever he went after the incident at the bank. For the first time in many years, she let herself truly remember her mother. Elizabeth Wellington Mitchell had been gorgeous, kind, and incredibly intelligent. She could speak 3 different languages, played the piano like a professional musician, and had a special talent for making everyone feel important. But she had also been very guarded about her past. Sarah recalled asking about her grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, but she always received vague responses. My family is complicated, my dear, Elizabeth used to say. Sometimes it is better to concentrate on the family we create for ourselves, rather than the one we are born into. Now, as she sat in the darkness of her kitchen, Sarah started to wonder if her mother had been trying to shield her daughters from something or someone. Right on cue, Richard's car pulled into the driveway. Sarah heard his footsteps on the porch, the sound of his key turning in the lock, and she prepared herself for the argument she knew was about to happen. We have to talk, Richard said the moment he stepped inside. Yes, Sarah replied calmly. We certainly do. Richard's voice boomed through the house as he walked toward the kitchen where Sarah was waiting. She could tell by the sound of his footsteps, heavy and angry, that the discussion they were about to have would not end well. You humiliated me today, Richard stated bluntly, yanking at his tie as he entered the room. Do you have any idea the damage you have done to my reputation? Your reputation? Sarah managed to keep her voice steady. You shoved your pregnant wife in a public place, and you are worried about your reputation. I barely even touched you. You are being dramatic, as always. Richard went to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, cracking it open with unnecessary force. But this is not about that. This is about you going behind my back and trying to get into my business accounts. Our accounts, Richard. We are married. No, Sarah. They are my accounts for my business. You have no legal claim to them, and you most certainly do not have the right to embarrass me in front of my banker. Sarah watched her husband gulp down his beer, noticing how his jaw tightened when he was angry and how his eyes avoided hers whenever he was lying. 8 years of marriage had taught her how to recognize these signs, but she had spent most of those years finding ways to justify them. Richard, I discovered the bank statements on your laptop. I know about the accounts. I know we are not having the financial problems you have been telling me about. Richard slammed his beer down on the counter hard enough to make Sarah jump. You searched through my private computer? I was trying to place a grocery order, but my phone battery died. I needed the password for the grocery application, and I noticed your email was open. The bank statements were right there. So you chose to snoop? I chose to try and figure out why my husband has been lying to me about our money while I have been busy clipping coupons and buying baby clothes from thrift shops. In the silence that filled the room, thick with 8 years of unspoken anger and lies, Sarah realized that she had always known Richard was controlling with money, but she had always told herself it was because he was a businessman. Successful CEOs are smart with their money, she would reason. They make plans for the future. They manage their resources carefully. Now, she was finally starting to see that what she had once called financial prudence was, in fact, financial abuse. You do not understand how business works, Sarah, Richard finally said. Those accounts are used for complex deals, for managing cash flow, things that are too complicated for you to grasp. Try me. What? Try me. Explain it to me. I have a degree in mathematics, Richard. I am pretty sure I can understand where our money is going. Richard's face hardened, and for a split second Sarah saw a look in his eyes that made her stomach twist in fear. You need to let this go, Sarah. You need to apologize for what happened today, and you need to promise me that you will never set foot in that bank again. Or what? Or you will face the consequences. The menace in his words hung between them like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt her baby kick, as if it could feel her heart racing, and she placed a protective hand on her belly. Are you making threats against me, Richard? I am protecting our family. Someone has to. Before Sarah could answer, her phone began to ring. The caller ID showed the same unknown number from earlier that evening. Do not answer that, Richard ordered. But Sarah had already answered the call. Hello? Mrs. Mitchell? It is James Wellington. I am sorry to call you so late, but I have done some more research since we spoke earlier, and I believe this matter is much more urgent than I first thought. What kind of matter? Sarah asked, fully aware of Richard standing only a few feet away, his body rigid with fury. I would rather not get into the details over the phone. Can we possibly meet first thing tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock? I do not think that is a wise idea, Sarah said, her eyes fixed on Richard's face, which was now a frightening shade of red. Mrs. Mitchell, I can understand why you might be hesitant, but I have information about your mother's family that I truly believe you must hear. Information concerning your inheritance. My what? Your inheritance, Mrs. Mitchell. I believe you might be the rightful heir to a very large family estate that you have never been informed about. Sarah's legs suddenly felt like they might give out. She lowered herself into a kitchen chair, her other hand still resting on her pregnant stomach. That is not possible. My mother's family cut her off when she married my father. Mrs. Mitchell, With all due respect, I am quite certain that you have been told a false version of your family's history. Your mother was my sister. We have been searching for you for more than 20 years. The phone dropped from Sarah's hand, clattering against the kitchen table. Richard acted fast, snatching the device before Sarah could even move. "This is Richard Mitchell," he stated into the phone, his tone sharp and businesslike. "My wife is pregnant, which makes her emotional, and she is in no state to make rational choices right now. I would appreciate you ending this harassment, whatever scheme you are trying to run." "Mr. Mitchell," James's voice was perfectly clear, even from several feet away. "I can promise you this is not a scheme. I am a licensed banker and a member of the Wellington family." "Your wife is my niece. That is impossible," Richard replied. But Sarah could detect the hint of doubt starting to enter his voice. "Mr. Mitchell, I possess documentation, family photos, and legal confirmation of our relationship. I also have some worries regarding your wife's financial status that we must discuss." Richard hung up and turned towards Sarah, who was looking at him with a blend of disbelief and dawning comprehension. "He is lying," Richard insisted. "It is clearly some type of scam. It is probably someone who found out about my business success and believes they can trick us out of our money." But Sarah was beginning to remember things. She recalled how her mother would get a distant look in her eyes whenever she mentioned Boston. She remembered the expensive jewelry that had strangely vanished after her mother passed away. Pieces her father insisted had just been lost. She thought about how her mother always seemed to know about art, music, and culture in a way that never quite matched the middle-class life they led. "What if he is not lying?" Sarah asked softly. "Be logical. If your mother was truly from some rich family, do you not think we would have known about it? Do you not think they would have reached out after she passed away?" "Perhaps they did try," Sarah countered, as the different pieces started to connect in her mind. "Maybe Dad just never told us. Your father would never have hidden something that important from you. Would he not?" Sarah rose to her feet, confronting her husband from across the kitchen. "Just like you would never hide financial details from me?" Richard's face became red with rage. "That is entirely different. Is it? You have been dishonest with me about our money for years, Richard. You let me believe we were barely getting by while you stashed thousands of dollars in bank accounts I knew nothing about. Why would I trust your opinion on what my own father might have concealed from me?" "Because I am your husband," Richard yelled. "Because I am the father of your child. Because every single thing I do is for the protection of our family. By deceiving me, by handling things you think I should not have to worry about." Sarah gazed at her husband, truly seeing him for the first time in their 8 years of marriage. She saw the need for control, the manipulation, and the way he always made her feel foolish and insignificant any time she dared to question him. This was her reality. This was the life she had come to accept as normal. "I am calling him back," she declared. "No, you are not." "Yes, I am, and I have a meeting with him tomorrow morning. Sarah, if you make that phone call, if you attend that meeting, you will face consequences. I am serious." Sarah lifted her phone and met her husband's gaze. "Richard, I do not believe you get it. I am no longer concerned about your consequences." While she scrolled through her call history to locate James Wellington's number, Sarah understood that, for the first time in many years, she did not fear her husband's temper. Her curiosity about the truth was far stronger than any fear he could inspire, and that single thought was more freeing than anything she had experienced in a very long time. The following morning, Sarah was seated across from James Wellington in his office, which was paneled in rich mahogany. Her hands were clasped around a cup of coffee that was now completely cold. The early morning sun poured through the high windows, bathing the room in a golden light that made the entire experience feel dreamlike. "You look just like her," James said quietly, examining Sarah's face as if he were memorizing a priceless picture. Like who? Like your mother, Elizabeth. She was my sister. Sarah's coffee cup clinked against its saucer as she put it down. Your sister? That cannot be possible. My mother's family cut her off after she married my father. James Wellington was a well-dressed man in his early 60s, with silver hair and gentle eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He was not smiling at the moment. His face showed a deep sorrow, tinged with what looked like regret. Is that what your father told you? James inquired softly. Sarah, we looked for Elizabeth for years after she vanished. We brought in private investigators, posted rewards, and checked on every Elizabeth Mitchell in the nation. We were convinced she was dead. She is dead. She had cancer. I was 12. I am aware. We discovered it 3 years after the fact. James slid open a desk drawer and took out a thick manila folder filled with papers. We were finally able to locate her death certificate in 2010. At that point, both you and your sister had already left your father's home. We had no means of finding you. Sarah felt as if the entire world was tilting on its axis. Everything she had been told about her mother's relatives, every reason she was given for their simple lifestyle, could have been a complete fabrication. Why would my father say that you all disowned her? She wondered aloud. To be honest, I have no idea, James replied. Elizabeth left Boston without warning right after her wedding to your father. She would not take our calls or answer our letters. We just figured David had persuaded her to sever her connection to us. Maybe he was worried you did not approve of him. We did have our reservations at first, James conceded. David appeared to be a decent fellow, but Elizabeth was in line to inherit a very large part of the Wellington family fortune. We were worried he might have been pursuing her for her money. And were you correct? James paused for a long while before speaking. I cannot say for sure. What I can say is that Elizabeth was due a trust fund valued at about $250 million at the time of her passing. That inheritance was supposed to go directly to her children. Sarah let out a laugh that had no joy in it. I am sorry, did you just say $250 million? That was the value in 2003. After calculating compound interest and investment returns, your inheritance is currently valued at approximately $2.7 trillion. Trillion? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. That is not possible. The Wellington family has been active in shipping, real estate, and technology for 4 generations, James calmly clarified. We were among the first to invest in several companies that grew to be incredibly successful. Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Your great-grandfather had an amazing ability to spot promising new technologies. Sarah jumped to her feet and paced over to the window that offered a view of the city skyline. This had to be some sort of error or a very detailed prank. People like her did not suddenly inherit trillions of dollars. People like her used coupons at the grocery store and stressed about affording furniture for a new baby. I need to see proof, she stated, her back still to him. I want to see the paperwork. Of course, James pulled out another folder and laid out several documents on his desk. Birth certificates, a family tree. We can even do genetic testing if you wish, and photographs that go all the way back to your mother's childhood. Sarah returned to the desk and began to examine the papers. There it was, her mother's birth certificate, Elizabeth Catherine Wellington, born in Boston, Massachusetts, and a family tree that traced the Wellington line all the way back to the 1800s. And then there were the photos, dozens of them, capturing a young woman who was Sarah's double at family get-togethers, charity galas, and formal dinners. This really is her, Sarah breathed, holding a picture of Elizabeth at what looked to be a college graduation. She seemed so happy. She was brilliant, James said with obvious pride. She graduated with highest honors from Harvard, holding degrees in both mathematics and computer science. She created algorithms that are still a core part of our investment strategies. Mom studied computer science? Sarah looked up, completely stunned. I had no idea. She never said a word about it. It seems there is a great deal your father chose not to tell you about your mother's life before she met him. Sarah collapsed back into her chair, completely overwhelmed by everything she was discovering. Her mother was not just a housewife who passed away too soon. She had been a gifted mathematician and computer scientist from one of the most affluent families in America. James, she began carefully, if all of this is real, if I truly am set to receive this inheritance, then there is something you must know about my husband. What is it about him? Yesterday, when I visited the bank to inquire about his accounts, he actually pushed me in front of everybody. And then last night, after your phone call, he threatened me. James's friendly expression hardened. What kind of threats did he make? He told me there would be consequences if I came to meet you today. Sarah, I have something else to tell you. Following our talk yesterday, I had my team of investigators do a background check on your husband. Richard Mitchell has been methodically accessing and taking money from a monthly allowance connected to your trust fund. What are you talking about? When you married Richard, he became eligible for a spousal allowance from your inheritance. For 8 long years, $50,000 had been deposited every single month. The thought made Sarah physically ill. $50,000. Your husband had been secretly collecting a fortune, almost $5 million of your own family's money, all while telling you there was not enough for a crib. The world seemed to spin as the sheer size of Richard's betrayal came into focus. He was not just hiding income from his business. He was hiding her inheritance, money that was hers by right, money that could have given them an entirely different life. He told me we were struggling just to get by, she said, her voice hollow. Sarah, your husband is a predator, and I am worried he is not acting by himself. What are you saying? James paused before placing another folder on the desk. Our investigators found out that Richard has a history of this. He has done it 2 other times. He seeks out women from wealthy backgrounds, marries them, and then gets control of their finances. Then he cuts them off from everyone they know. There were others? Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her pregnant stomach. What became of them? His first wife, a woman named Margaret Thornton, took her own life after he emptied her entire trust fund. The second one, Patricia Carlyle, vanished without a trace. Her family is convinced she is dead, but a body has never been recovered. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. The man she had built a life with, the father of the child she was carrying, was very likely a murderer. Sarah, I believe you are in far more danger than we first thought, James said softly, especially since you now know about the inheritance. The baby, Sarah whispered. He has been insisting the baby take his last name, and for him to be the primary parent on all the legal paperwork. If something were to happen to you, and Richard was the child's main legal guardian, he would gain control over your entire fortune through the baby. The realization struck Sarah with the force of a physical blow. Richard was not just stealing her money now, he was setting himself up to get everything if she died, and based on what happened to his other wives, her death would probably not be an accident. I have to get away from him, Sarah declared, pushing herself to her feet. I have to leave. Not just yet, James insisted. If you would just disappear, Richard will know you have discovered the truth. We have to be smart about this. We need to keep you and your baby safe. So what is the plan? First, we are moving your inheritance to new accounts that he cannot touch. Then we are going to collect all the proof of Richard's crimes and his abuse. And after that, we are going to ensure he can never harm another person again. Sarah looked at her uncle, and a feeling she had not felt in years began to return. Hope. For the first time since learning of Richard's lies, she did not feel so utterly alone. Where do we begin? She asked. James gave her a warm smile that reminded her so much of her mother. We start by moving you to a secure location, and then it is time for you to meet the rest of your family. When Sarah arrived home that afternoon, she found Richard in the living room. A large stack of legal papers was fanned out across the coffee table. He was wearing his best suit, the one reserved for major business meetings, and his face had a calm, controlled look that always set Sarah on edge. "Hello, my love," he said, not even glancing up from the documents. "We have to talk." Sarah put down her purse, her keys clinking on the entry table. She noticed Richard was standing directly between her and the only way out of the house. It was a small gesture of intimidation, but she saw it for what it truly was now. "What is all this?" she asked, nodding toward the papers. "These will make our lives much easier," Richard replied, finally meeting her gaze with a smile that held no warmth. "It is a financial power of attorney, an updated will, and the custody agreement for our baby." A chill went down Sarah's spine. These were the exact documents her uncle had warned her about. "Richard, we have not even talked about any of this. The baby is not coming for another 3 months. We are talking about it now." Richard rose to his feet and walked toward her, making sure to block her path to the door. "It is clear you are not responsible enough to manage our money, especially after that little display you made at the bank yesterday. So I will be handling everything from now on." "I am not signing those papers," Sarah said, taking a step back toward the kitchen. Richard's perfectly calm expression began to crack. "Yes, you will." "No, Richard, I will not. Sarah, it seems you are forgetting a few key things." Richard followed her, his voice shifting into that condescending tone she despised. "You are 7 months pregnant with my child. You do not have a job, you have no money of your own, and you have no family to help you. You need me." The lies were so practiced, so smooth, that for a second, Sarah almost fell for them again. A few hours ago, she would have, but not anymore. "Actually, Richard, I do have family, and they have more resources than you could possibly dream of." For the first time, Richard's confident look started to crumble. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about my mother's family, the Wellingtons. Have you heard of them?" All the color vanished from Richard's face so suddenly, Sarah thought he might actually collapse. "That is not possible. You told me they cut your mother off. I was mistaken, and you were mistaken when you thought you could steal their money." Richard's mask of calm shattered completely, revealing the furious, cornered man he truly was. "You have no idea what you are saying, do I not? I know all about the $50,000 a month you have been siphoning from my trust. I know about Margaret Thornton. I know about Patricia Carlyle. I know you marry wealthy women only to ruin their lives." Richard's face flushed from pale white to a deep, angry red. "Who told you these things?" "My Uncle James, the same bank manager you tried to bully yesterday." "Your uncle?" Richard's voice trembled. "Sarah, whatever he told you, it is not true. They are just trying to poison you against me, the same way you poisoned me against my own family with your lies for the last 8 years." Richard snatched the pile of documents from the coffee table and marched to the front door. "This is not finished, Sarah. You are in way over your head. Yes, it is finished. And I know exactly what I am up against. I am up against a man who only married me for a fortune he never knew I had." Richard stopped at the door, his hand gripping the knob. "You think you are so clever now, do you not? You think your rich family is going to come and rescue you? I think I can finally see the truth for the first time in 8 years. Well, allow me to make things a little clearer for you, sweetheart." Richard's voice dropped to a menacing whisper that made her skin crawl. "You are pregnant with my son. That gives me rights. Legal rights. And if you believe you can just leave me because you stumbled upon some family wealth You are in for a rude awakening. Get out, Richard. This is my house, too. Get out of my house before I call the authorities." Richard just stared at her, and in that moment, Sarah saw something in his eyes that truly scared her. It was the look of a desperate, trapped animal, a man with absolutely nothing to lose. "You are going to regret this, Sarah. I can guarantee you that." The second Richard was gone, Sarah was on the phone with James. "He knows," she said, the words tumbling out as soon as he picked up. "He knows I met with you, and he knows about the money. James, I think he is truly dangerous. Where are you right now?" "I am at the house." "Baum, but I do not feel safe staying here." "You are right. Get a small bag ready with just the essentials for a couple of days. I am sending a private car for you right now." "Where am I going?" "To the family home. It is time for you to finally meet the Wellingtons." About 20 minutes later, while Sarah was frantically throwing clothes and toiletries into a suitcase, she heard a car pull up the driveway. It was not the car James had sent. It was Richard's black sports car, and he was not by himself. Looking through the bedroom window, Sarah saw two large men get out of the car. They were dressed in expensive suits and looked like they could be bodyguards, or something much worse. Her phone buzzed. It was James. "Sarah, the car I sent for you is just a minute away." "Richard is here," Sarah whispered, backing away from the window. "He has two other men with him. I think he is going to try and make me sign those documents. Go into the bathroom right now and lock the door. Do not open it for anyone until you hear police sirens." "You called the police?" "I called them the moment you told me he made threats against you. They should be arriving any second." Sarah could hear the front door being forced open, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Richard started shouting her name. She grabbed her packed bag, ran into the master bathroom, and turned the lock just as she heard someone reach the top of the stairs. "Sarah," his voice boomed through the house, "do not make this any more difficult than it has to be. All we need to do is have a little chat." Sarah crouched in the small bathroom, her arm wrapped protectively around her stomach. She thought about how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she was a lonely pregnant wife, married to a controlling man she mistakenly thought she loved. Today, she was a wealthy heiress, hiding from a husband who was probably planning to kill her. Then, she heard the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder and closer with every passing second. From inside the bathroom, Sarah heard the sharp, angry tones of voices from downstairs, which ended with the forceful slam of the front door. By the time officers managed to break down the bathroom door to check on her safety, Richard and his friends had vanished. But they had left something behind that sent a chill straight through Sarah's heart. On her bed, right beside her open suitcase, lay the legal papers Richard had been pressuring her to sign. Now, however, they were completely filled out, with her signature forged on every line. Detective Rodriguez spoke to her softly, saying, "Mrs. Mitchell, we've uncovered evidence of significant financial fraud, identity theft, and a clear history of domestic abuse that goes back through 3 separate marriages. Your uncle gave us a very large amount of documentation." Sarah asked, "What is going to happen now?" The detective replied, "Now, we ensure that your husband never gets another opportunity to harm you or anyone else again." As the police cruisers pulled away, their evidence bags filled with the fraudulent papers, and all of Richard's financial statements, Sarah understood that she was, at last, truly free. She was free from all the lies, free from the constant manipulation, and free from living in fear. More importantly, she was finally free to find out who she really was, after so many years of being told she had no power. That journey of self-discovery was only just starting. The Wellington family estate covered 200 acres of beautiful Hudson Valley landscape. Its Georgian-style mansion rose up from perfectly kept gardens, looking like something out of a storybook. As their car moved along the circular driveway, Sarah pushed her face against the window, finding it hard to believe this incredible place was part of her family's history. "This was your mother's home," James said gently from the seat next to her. "She would ride her horses in those fields every single morning before she left for school." In the distance, Sarah could see horses grazing, their coats shining in the afternoon sun. "She never once told me about any horses. She never told me about any of this at all," James continued. "Elizabeth had a real talent with animals. She actually won a few equestrian championships while she was in college." He gestured toward a smaller structure that was visible past some trees. "That is the stable where she kept her horse, Midnight. After she moved away, we let him retire in the pasture. He lived to be 32 years old. We buried him right over there, under that big oak tree." The car slowed to a halt at the mansion's main entrance, where a man and a woman stood waiting on the porch steps. Sarah knew who they were from the family pictures James had shared with her. They were her cousins, David and Margaret. As she stepped out of the car, David Wellington walked toward her with a warm smile that instantly made her feel welcome. He looked to be in his early 40s, with sandy brown hair and fine lines around his eyes from laughing. He had the look of a movie star, if he had not been in charge of Wellington Holdings' West Coast business. David said, "Elizabeth always talked about wanting to have daughters one day," as he pulled Sarah into a careful hug, making room for her pregnant belly. "I wanted to say it, Radhi. She would have been incredibly proud of you." Margaret Wellington was a bit more formal, but just as kind. She was tall and sophisticated, with a single streak of silver in her dark hair, and she carried herself with an authority that could easily command a boardroom anywhere on earth. "We have gotten your mother's old bedroom ready for you," Margaret said, her voice clear yet gentle. "I do hope you will find it comfortable while we handle this whole mess with your husband." As they entered the mansion's grand front hallway, Sarah was completely taken aback by the sheer magnificence of everything around her. Crystal chandeliers dangled from intricately painted ceilings, walls were adorned with priceless works of art, and the floors, which seemed to be polished to a mirror shine, were covered with beautiful Persian rugs. "It is certainly a lot to process," James remarked, seeing the look on her face. "Your mother felt the exact same way when she came back home after college. She often said the house reminded her of a museum. That is, until she started filling it with her laughter." They went up a majestic, curving staircase to the second floor, where James swung open a door to reveal a sun-drenched bedroom suite that made Sarah gasp. The room was decorated in calming shades of blue and yellow, and it featured French doors that opened onto a private balcony with a view of the gardens. "This was Elizabeth's room from the time she was 12 years old until she went away to college," Margaret clarified. "We have kept everything in here precisely the way she left it." Sarah moved slowly through the room, absorbing all the little details that told her so much about the mother she never had the chance to truly know. One wall was covered with bookshelves, packed with books on mathematics, computer science, classic literature, and art. A baby grand piano was positioned in a corner by the windows, with a Chopin nocturne still open on the music stand. "She was a beautiful pianist," David commented, noticing where Sarah was looking. "Every Christmas Eve, she would put on a private concert just for the family." On the dressing table was a collection of family pictures Sarah had never laid eyes on before. They showed her mother laughing with her friends, getting academic honors, riding horses, and playing with young cousins, who were now the adults, making Sarah feel at home. "There is something I need to show you," James said, as he opened a door that connected to an office. "This is the space where your mother did all of her computer programming." The office was filled with advanced technology that seemed to be years ahead of its time. The area was packed with multiple computer screens, powerful processors, and other pieces of equipment that Sarah did not even recognize. Elizabeth created trading algorithms that are, to this day, generating revenue for the family's foundation, Margaret shared. Her contributions to artificial intelligence were groundbreaking back then. She was creating predictive models for the financial markets that were 20 years more advanced than what anyone else in the industry was doing. David also added, if she had lived, she would have completely transformed the world of computational finance. Sarah slowly sat down in the chair at her mother's desk, letting her fingers glide across the keyboard of a computer that was far more advanced than anything she ever thought her mother would own. Why did she never mention any of this to me? Sarah wondered out loud. Perhaps she was waiting for the right time, James offered kindly. Maybe she believed she had more time to tell you. A gentle knock on the door broke the moment. Margaret's assistant stood in the doorway with a worried look on her face. I am so sorry to bother you, but there has been a new development. Richard Mitchell just attempted to get into Sarah's primary trust account. When the bank denied him access, he got very upset and started making threats toward the bank staff. James's face grew stern. What kind of threats did he make? He informed the bank teller that if the Wellington family believed they could take his wife and his child, they were going to be very sorry. He claimed to have resources we are not aware of and methods for getting what he considers his. Sarah felt a sharp kick from her baby, who was reacting to her rising anxiety. He is not going to stop, is he? She asked. No, James responded, with a grim expression. Men like Richard never stop. When they feel trapped, they become more dangerous. Margaret walked over to the window, her face deep in thought. We must be ready for the chance that he will try something reckless. What are you suggesting? Sarah inquired. I am suggesting that Richard Mitchell has already had 2 wives who died under very questionable circumstances, David stated. He is now facing total financial collapse and a criminal trial. Desperate men will do desperate things. As if their words had called him, Sarah's phone suddenly started to ring. Richard's name flashed on the screen, and the room went completely still. Do not pick it up, James cautioned her. Actually, I think it is time I did, Sarah replied, taking them all by surprise. I want to hear exactly what he has to say. She took the call and activated the speakerphone so that everyone else could listen in. Sarah, my love, I have been absolutely sick with worry about you. Richard's voice was silky and filled with fake concern, the same tone he always used when he was trying to manipulate her. Where are you? I am in a safe place, Richard, a very safe place. Sarah, you are 7 months pregnant. You belong at home where I can look after you. The same way you looked after Margaret Thornton and Patricia Carlyle. An icy silence hung on the line for a few long moments. When Richard finally spoke again, all the fake warmth was gone from his voice. I can see they have been poisoning your mind with their stories. Are they just stories, Richard? Did Margaret Thornton really kill herself right after you emptied out her trust fund? Did Patricia Carlyle just vanish into thin air after she told you she was leaving you? Sarah, you are being played by people who only want to use you to get to your money. Can you not see what they are doing? The only one who has ever used me for money is you. Everything I have ever done was to keep our family safe. By helping yourself to $5 million of my inheritance, by faking my signature on official legal papers, by threatening to take my own baby away from me. Richard's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled away. That baby is my child too, Sarah, and I will always get what belongs to me. Every last bit of it. The only thing you are going to get is a long stay in prison. We will just have to see about that. Richard's voice dropped to a low whisper, a sound that made everyone in the room stiffen with alarm. Do you really believe your fancy, rich relatives can keep you safe? Do you think for a second they can stop me from getting to my child? You do not have a clue what I'm truly capable of." The call ended abruptly. James was immediately on the phone with his security detail, while Margaret was getting in touch with the family's lawyers. David remained by the window, his eyes scanning the property with the focus of a man who was anticipating an attack. "He is going to make a move tonight," David said, his voice heavy. "I can just feel it." Sarah rested her hands on her pregnant belly, feeling her daughter give a strong kick, as if she could also feel the danger that was closing in beyond them. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We will protect you and your baby," James declared with absolute certainty. "No matter what it takes." As the sun disappeared below the horizon over the Wellington estate, Sarah understood that her new life of wealth and family also brought with it threats she had never known. But for the first time in 8 years, she would not have to face those threats by herself. That single choice changed everything. The piercing scream of the estate's security alarm shattered the silence at 2 o'clock in the morning. In her mother's former bedroom, Sarah lurched awake. Her hand flew to her pregnant belly as she struggled to figure out what was happening. She could see the beams of flashlights cutting through the dark gardens beyond the balcony's French doors. Just then, her phone buzzed with an urgent call from James. "Sarah, you must remain in your room and keep clear of the windows. There are several intruders on the grounds." "Is it Richard?" "It is almost definitely him. Our security team is on it, but I need you to go to your mother's old safe room now. Look for the bookshelf next to the piano." Sarah's eyes scanned the room, which was bathed in moonlight. "Find the Shakespeare sonnets on the third shelf from the top. It has a blue leather cover. Pull on it." Sarah located the volume and gave it a tug. She gasped as an entire portion of the bookshelf pivoted inward, uncovering a secret room. As Sarah entered the hidden space, James's voice came through the phone. "That was put in during the Cold War. Your mother would hide in there whenever she got into some trouble." He continued, "Inside, you will find a phone, water, and a dedicated line to the police." The room was surprisingly spacious, furnished with cozy chairs, emergency supplies, and a bank of monitors displaying live feeds from the estate's cameras. The screens showed dark-clad figures stealthily approaching the mansion. "I can see at least 6 of them," Sarah reported to James over the secure line. Richard brought backup. "But we were ready for him." On the monitors, Sarah watched. Sarah saw the estate's security personnel expertly encircle the trespassers. A nerve-wracking standoff unfolded over the next hour. Richard's men tried to force their way into the mansion, but the Wellington team carefully held them back, avoiding any violence. At 3:15 in the morning, the powerful estate floodlights suddenly turned on, bathing the grounds in light and exposing the intruders. Sarah could now see Richard perfectly. He was standing by the main entrance, holding something that looked like a weapon. James's voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Richard Mitchell, you are trespassing. If you leave immediately, we may not press charges." "I want my wife," Richard yelled in return. "I want my baby. You cannot keep them from me." "Your wife is here by her own choice," James announced, "and she has requested that you leave her alone. She has been brainwashed. She has no idea what she is doing." From inside the safe room, Sarah pushed a button to broadcast her own voice outside. It rang out across the property, unexpectedly firm and clear. "Richard, I know precisely what I am doing. I know about the money you stole. I know about Margaret and Patricia. I know who you really are." Richard's voice was filled with panic. "Sarah, you are making a huge mistake. These people do not care about you. They only want to control you." The only one who has been controlling me is you, Richard. I am your husband. I love you. You do not love me, Sarah replied. You love the idea of what you could steal from me. The stalemate dragged on for another 20 minutes. Richard switched between begging and making threats, but the security team did not move. On the monitors, Sarah saw police cruisers pulling up, their flashing red and blue lights pulsing across the lawns. A Detective Rodriguez stepped forward, holding a megaphone. Richard Mitchell, you are under arrest for trespassing, domestic violence, financial fraud, and conspiracy. Drop your weapon and show me your hands. This is just a big misunderstanding, Richard yelled. They have my pregnant wife in there against her wishes. Sir, we have already talked to your wife, the detective said. She is here of her own free will and has asked for our protection from you. The events that followed sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Richard did not surrender. Instead, he lifted his weapon and aimed it not at the officers, but at the mansion windows where he imagined Sarah was watching. If I cannot have her, then nobody will, he shrieked. The police reacted instantly and with great force. In a matter of seconds, they had Richard on the ground. His weapon was gone, and his hands were secured behind his back. His accomplices gave up immediately. After the police cars carrying Richard and his men had departed, Sarah finally left the safe room. She found James, David, and Margaret waiting for her in the hall. Is it really over? She asked. The immediate threat has passed, James confirmed, but Richard is likely facing federal charges for his financial crimes, plus attempted assault from tonight. He will be in prison for a very, very long time. The weight of it all hit Sarah, and she collapsed into a nearby chair, feeling utterly drained. I cannot believe I married a man who could do something like this. Margaret spoke with a soft voice. Monsters are experts at pretending to be human. It is not your fault you did not see his disguise. So what do I do now? Sarah wondered. David smiled warmly. Right now, your job is to have a healthy baby. Our job is to teach you what it means to be a Wellington. Just 3 months later, Sarah delivered a healthy, beautiful baby girl inside the estate's own medical wing. Cradling her daughter, whom she named Elizabeth after her grandmother, Sarah was amazed by the complete transformation of her life. She has your mother's eyes, James said quietly, as he looked down at his great niece. Margaret chuckled and added, and I bet she has her grandmother's determination too. Sarah glanced around the room at her newfound family, James, David, Margaret, and a few other cousins, all there to meet the newest member of the Wellington family. It was the first time in her entire life she had felt completely secure and genuinely loved. What do you say, Elizabeth? Sarah whispered to the baby. Are you ready to find out about our family's legacy? The baby yawned and snuggled deeper into her mother's embrace, as if signaling she was prepared for any challenge. Sarah knew with certainty that the two of them could face anything together. 6 weeks later, Sarah was standing before the massive windows of the Wellington Foundation's main office in Manhattan. Her daughter was asleep in her arms. Below them, the vast city spread out like a map of human drive and success, a city her family had helped build for 4 generations. James came to stand beside her at the window. Your great-grandfather bought this building back in 1943. Everyone told him he was out of his mind for putting so much money into Manhattan property back then. Why did he do it? Sarah asked, swaying gently as Elizabeth began to stir. He had vision, James said, pointing to the busy streets. He could see potential where no one else could. Today, Wellington Holdings has ownership of 47 buildings just in Manhattan, not to mention major properties in London, Tokyo, and Dubai. Margaret came over holding a tablet displaying financial data that would have been completely baffling to Sarah a few months prior. But now, after weeks of focused learning, about the family business, she was starting to grasp the immense scale of her inheritance. Your personal trust provides about $50 million a year in income without you lifting a finger, Margaret clarified. But that is only a small part of it. The family foundation manages assets valued at more than $400 billion. $400 billion, Sarah echoed the number, finding it difficult to even imagine such a sum. David walked into the office, holding a pile of project proposals. Your mother's financial algorithms by themselves have earned over $60 billion since she passed away. We have been using that money to finance clean water initiatives in poorer nations. We also fund scholarship programs for students from low-income backgrounds and vital medical research. Sarah moved toward a portrait of her mother that was displayed in the main conference room. The painting of Elizabeth Wellington Mitchell seemed to smile at her, featuring the same kind eyes her own baby Elizabeth now had. She could have changed the whole technology sector if she had lived, Sarah said quietly. She still did, James corrected her gently. She did it through her creations, through you, and now through your daughter. A legacy is more than what we achieve ourselves. It is about the opportunities we create for future generations. In the weeks that followed, Sarah dedicated herself to understanding the Wellington Empire from top to bottom. She pored over financial statements, participated in board meetings, and spoke with the foundation's leaders to see how their money was making a positive difference globally. We are not just wealthy people throwing money around, Margaret clarified during one of their training sessions. We are guardians of resources that have the power to transform the world. Every single investment, every donation, and every business deal can affect millions of people. Sarah discovered that Wellington Holdings was one of the first supporters of renewable energy firms that are now at the forefront of combating climate change. The company's education initiatives had helped more than 200,000 students escape poverty and build successful careers. Their funding for medical research had led to breakthroughs in treating cancer, Alzheimer's, and uncommon genetic conditions. This is the world your mother wanted to build, James said to Sarah one night as they looked over plans for new projects. She felt that having wealth was pointless if it did not serve a greater good. But what about my daughter? Sarah asked, glancing down at Elizabeth, who was happily chewing on a teething ring. What kind of future can she possibly have with all of this surrounding her? That really depends on how you choose to raise her, David said after a moment of thought. Wealth can be an incredible gift or a terrible burden. It can provide the means to change the world for the better, or it can completely cut someone off from reality. How can I be sure it's a gift for her? You can do that by teaching her that with great privilege comes great responsibility, Margaret added. You have to show her that the advantages she has are not just for her own gain, but to help everyone she has the power to lift up. In the months that followed, Sarah slowly began to find her footing within the family business. Her skills with mathematics, paired with everything she was learning about her mother's work, made her an especially valuable asset to the Foundation's Technology Investment Division. You have your mother's gift for seeing which new ideas will truly change things, James remarked one afternoon after Sarah had brilliantly pinpointed a small startup that later grew into a billion-dollar company. It is almost as if you inherited her special formula for predicting the future. 1 year to the day after learning about her true family, Sarah was invited to speak at the Foundation's annual board meeting. Standing before the room full of directors, who were titans of industry, Nobel laureates, and leaders of social change, she could feel the immense weight of her family's legacy and her personal duty to continue it. A year ago, I believed I was just an ordinary person, Sarah started. I was an expectant mother, married to a man who only saw me as a way to get what he wanted. I had no clue that I was born into a family that was devoted to using its resources to help other people rise. She scanned the room seeing the faces that had grown so familiar over the last year. People who had accepted her, not just as an heiress, but as a colleague in their shared mission to make the world a better place. Today, I stand before you to propose something new, the Elizabeth Wellington Initiative for Women's Financial Independence. Sarah advanced to her first slide, which displayed statistics on domestic financial abuse that caused several board members to audibly gasp. Each year, countless thousands of women feel trapped in abusive situations simply because they do not have the money to get away safely. They remain with partners who harm them, who steal from them, and who control their every move, all because they think they have nowhere else to go. The room fell into a profound silence as Sarah spoke on. We are going to change that reality. My proposal is that we designate $100 million every year to offer free legal help, emergency shelter, financial literacy courses, and seed money for women who are leaving abusive situations. A board member, Dr. Patricia Chen, raised her hand. What makes you so certain that we can succeed where so many other groups have failed? Because we possess something that those other organizations do not, Sarah answered. We have the ability to offer complete long-term assistance. Most programs for domestic violence can only give temporary housing and some basic counseling. We can provide all of that, plus vocational training, educational grants, legal defense, and startup funds for new small businesses. We can build a pathway that leads women from a moment of crisis to a life of independence and then to true empowerment. Sarah went on, and after that, we can show them how to help other women achieve the exact same thing. The board's vote to approve the initiative was unanimous. Just 6 months later, the Elizabeth Wellington Initiative had assisted more than 3,000 women in escaping abusive partners and starting their lives over. The program delivers on every promise, from immediate crisis support to long-term career planning, achieving a success rate that was higher than even Sarah's most hopeful predictions. Your mother would be so incredibly proud, James said to Sarah as they looked over the program's first annual report. She always said that the single greatest privilege of having money was the power to open doors for people who had none. Sarah looked down at her baby, Elizabeth, who was now a year old and was already showing glimpses of her grandmother's sharp mind and fierce will. As she watched her daughter stacking blocks, building tall towers, and then knocking them down just to build them up once more, Sarah could see a future full of infinite possibilities. You know what I believe, Elizabeth, Sarah whispered to her little girl. I believe your great-grandmother would have been wonderful at this work, and I believe that you are going to be even more amazing at it one day. Elizabeth gazed up at her mother and clapped her small hands together, as if she were saying she was ready for any challenge that came her way. Through the foundation's large windows, the sun was beginning to set over the Manhattan skyline. It bathed the city in a beautiful golden light. In that quiet moment, Sarah could feel the spirit of all the Wellington women who had lived before her, and of all the women who would follow. Together, they were creating something that would endure long after they were all gone, something that was destined to change the world. 2 years after Richard's conviction, Sarah allowed herself to think that the worst was finally over. The Elizabeth Wellington Initiative was flourishing. Her daughter was a happy and healthy toddler, and she had finally found her purpose at the family foundation. But legal fights with narcissistic abusers are rarely ever simple, and Richard Mitchell was, if nothing else, incredibly relentless. Sarah, we have to talk. James's tone was serious as he walked into her office at the foundation's headquarters in Manhattan. Richard's legal team just filed an appeal. Sarah lifted her head from the financial statement she was reading, her heart instantly starting to pound in her chest. An appeal for what? They are arguing that his conviction was secured with fabricated evidence. They are demanding an entirely new trial and are also requesting emergency custody until a new verdict is reached. Emergency custody. Sarah's voice shot up with such alarm that 2-year-old Elizabeth looked up from her coloring book, her face filled with concern. But he is in prison. Not any longer. James's face was grimmer than Sarah had ever seen it. He was let out on bail while the appeal is pending. The judge decided he was not a flight risk because of his strong business connections in the area. Sarah felt that old, familiar, ice-cold dread that she truly thought she had escaped for good. When did this happen? 3 days ago. 3 days? Why was I not told? We have been working non-stop to make our legal case stronger before we broke the news to you. Sarah, there's something else. Richard's lawyers are now claiming that your testimony was forced. And they are also saying that the Wellington family used its influence to manipulate the original investigation. Margaret came into the office, followed by their chief lawyer, Jonathan Blake, who had been the family's legal counsel for more than 20 years. His face was serious, yet he looked completely self-assured. Mrs. Mitchell, Jonathan began, I need you to understand that Richard's legal team is just trying anything they can think of. The case against him is absolutely solid, and these new accusations are just flimsy attempts to manufacture some kind of reasonable doubt. But what if it actually works? Sarah asked. What if they can persuade a jury that I was coerced into speaking out against him? That is not going to happen, Margaret said with conviction. We have years of documentation, financial statements that cannot be faked, and sworn testimony from the families of his other victims. And what about Elizabeth? Is it possible he could get custody? Jonathan shook his head. Temporary custody is only granted when there is proof a child is in immediate peril. With her current guardian, you are a model mother with endless resources to ensure Elizabeth's well-being. A judge would never take her away from you because of these ridiculous accusations, but despite their confidence, Sarah was a bundle of nerves for the entire next week. She hired more security for the property, scaled back her public events, and caught herself checking and rechecking locks on doors she had not secured in months. Elizabeth picked up on her mother's anxiety and became extra clingy, not wanting to play by herself and waking from nightmares and tears. Is Mama scared? Elizabeth asked one morning, her words still simple, but her grasp of emotions impressively sharp. Mama is just taking extra precautions, my love, Sarah answered, scooping her daughter onto her lap. But we are perfectly safe. We are surrounded by people who love and protect us. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of Sarah's foundation board meeting. Margaret took the call, listened for a second, and all the color drained from her face. That was security from the courthouse, Margaret said to the entire room. Richard Mitchell has just filed an emergency request for full custody of Elizabeth. His claim is that Sarah is mentally unstable after coming into so much money and that Elizabeth is being raised in a harmful environment. Sarah's hands started to tremble. Is that something he can do? He can file any paperwork he wants, Jonathan stated, already packing his briefcase. Actually winning is a completely different story. We have to leave for the courthouse right now. The urgent hearing took place that very afternoon. Sarah sat inside the courtroom, clutching Elizabeth tightly. The little girl had demanded to bring her favorite stuffed elephant along to what she assumed was just another one of the boring meetings that grown-ups went to. Richard's attorney, a woman with sharp features named Victoria Steinberg, laid out their case with a type of smooth hostility that made Sarah's skin crawl. Your Honor, my client is asserting that Sarah Mitchell has become mentally unbalanced ever since she learned about her inheritance. She went from living a simple, middle-class existence to now believing that she is owed billions of dollars. This fantasy has caused her to make up false stories about a successful businessman who has been nothing but a caring husband and father. Objection, Jonathan Blake said as he rose to his feet. Mrs. Mitchell's inheritance is completely documented and has been officially confirmed. She is not having a fantasy. She is, in fact, one of the most wealthy women in all of America. Judge Harrison, a sensible woman in her 60s, listened intently, looked doubtful. Miss Steinberg, are you making the argument that becoming an heiress is a form of mental illness? Your Honor, I am arguing that this abrupt change in lifestyle, along with the pressure from family members with their own financial interests, has impaired Mrs. Mitchell's judgment. She is no longer able to make decisions that are in the best interest of her child. Sarah could feel her anger rising. Richard was using the exact same manipulation tactics in this courtroom that he had used during their marriage, all in an attempt to take her daughter away. Steinberg continued, furthermore, Mr. Mitchell has cause to believe his wife is being cut off from friends and outside opinions, surrounded only by those who gain from keeping her dependent on the Wellington family wealth. Your Honor, Jonathan Blake cut in, if we are going to talk about isolation and dependency, then let us look at Mr. Mitchell's own actions during his marriage. He deliberately isolated Mrs. Mitchell from her friends, controlled every penny she had, and made her think she was entirely dependent on him. All the while, he was secretly siphoning millions from her trust fund. Judge Harrison looked toward Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, I would like to hear from you. What is your response to these claims about your mental condition and your ability to be a mother? Sarah stood up, with Elizabeth resting on her hip, and looked at the judge who held their future in his hands. Your Honor, 2 years ago, my entire life was a lie. I was married to a man who made me believe I was worthless, weak, and unable to survive without him. Then I found out I have a family that loves me, the means to give my daughter a wonderful future, and the power to help other women escape the very same type of abuse I went through. She stared directly at Richard, who sat at the defendant's table, wearing a look of false concern, and she now saw was just calculated manipulation. If doing all of that makes me mentally unstable, then I will happily be considered crazy for the rest of my days, because the only other choice is to return to being that frightened, lonely woman who let somebody else decide what she was worth. Judge Harrison watched Sarah for a long moment. Mrs. Mitchell, could you describe your current home life and your support network for me? I live on the Wellington family estate with my Uncle James, my cousins David and Margaret, and a dedicated staff who assist with Elizabeth's care when I am working. She has her own doctor, a specialist for her education, and more loving relatives than any child could ever hope for. And your work at the foundation? I am in charge of a program that has already assisted more than 10,000 women in leaving abusive situations and starting new lives. This work gives my own life a deep sense of purpose and provides Elizabeth with a legacy she can be proud of one day. Just then, Elizabeth declared, in a loud, clear voice, "Mama, help people." A wave of soft laughter went through the courtroom, and even Judge Harrison cracked a smile. Miss Steinberg, the judge said, directing his attention back to Richard's attorney, what proof can you offer that Mr. Mitchell would provide a superior environment for this child compared to what Mrs. Mitchell has just laid out? Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell is a successful chief executive officer with a stable income he got by stealing from his wife's trust fund. Alleged stealing, Your Honor. Those charges are still being appealed. The financial documents are not being appealed, Miss Steinberg. The proof is perfectly clear that Mr. Mitchell moved millions of dollars out of accounts owned by his wife without her ever knowing or agreeing to it. Judge Harrison reviewed his notes for several minutes as the courtroom sat in a heavy, anxious silence. Elizabeth was playing quietly with a stuffed elephant, sometimes murmuring to herself about Mama's work and Uncle James. At last, the judge broke the silence. The motion for emergency custody is denied, Mr. Mitchell. The information brought forward today indicates that you are not trying to gain custody for your daughter's well-being, but as a way to keep control over your ex-wife and her money. Richard started to get up from his chair. Your Honor, that is not... Sit down, Mr. Mitchell. In addition, I am ordering you to stay a minimum of 500 feet away from Mrs. Mitchell and the child at all times. Any breach of this order will lead to your immediate arrest and imprisonment. As they walked out of the courthouse, Sarah felt a tremendous weight lift off her shoulders, a burden she hadn't fully realized she was carrying. Richard's last-ditch legal attacks had all failed, and now she was finally completely free. Mama happy? Elizabeth asked as they headed toward their car. Yes, my sweet girl. Mama is very happy. Later that evening, Sarah sat in the room that had once belonged to her mother at the estate, holding Elizabeth as she fell asleep. Looking out the windows, she could see the glowing lights of the Foundation's research center, where teams of scientists were developing projects that would better the lives of millions. She thought back to the scared, pregnant woman who had been shoved in a bank lobby 3 years before, and she smiled. That woman had found her people. That woman had found her inner strength. That woman had started to change the world, and she was only just getting started. 5 years after the court victory that guaranteed Elizabeth's safety, Sarah was once again standing before the Wellington Foundation's board of directors. This time, however, she was not just proposing a new project. She was about to be confirmed as the Foundation's youngest ever chairwoman. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced to the full boardroom, I am so proud to introduce our new chairwoman, Sarah Wellington Mitchell. The applause that followed was deafening. Elizabeth, who was now 7 years old and sitting in the front row next to her Uncle James, clapped her hands with excitement and shouted, That's my mama! More laughter filled the room. The kind of warm, heartfelt joy that made Sarah's heart overflow with thankfulness for the family she had found and the life she had created. Thank you, Sarah said, her voice filled with a strength and confidence that would have been unimaginable to the timid woman she used to be. 5 years ago, I thought I had myself all figured out. I was mistaken about almost everything. She advanced to the first slide of her presentation, which displayed a picture of the first Elizabeth Wellington Initiative office, just one small room with 2 desks and a single telephone. Today, the Elizabeth Wellington Initiative is active in 47 states and 12 countries. We have assisted over 50,000 women in leaving abusive homes and getting back on their feet. But that is merely the start of what we can achieve when we work together. Sarah glanced around the room at the faces of people who had become her family, board members who saw her not just as an heiress, but as a true partner in their shared goal to make the world a better place. I want to share my vision with you for the next stage of our efforts, the Elizabeth Wellington Global Education Initiative. She moved to the next slide, which showed data on women's education across the globe that caused several board members to lean in, intrigued. As of right now, more than 130 million girls around the planet are refused an education for the simple reason that they are female. They are prevented from attending school due to poverty, cultural traditions, and families that fail to see the importance of educating their daughters. Elizabeth Wellington, from her seat in the front row, put up her small hand. Mama, can I ask something? Sarah smiled, delighted by her daughter's inquisitiveness. Of course, my love. Why do some people not want girls to learn? That is the most important question of all, Elizabeth. And it is the very reason we have to make a change. Sarah addressed the board again. We possess the funds to create complete educational programs that do more than just place girls into classrooms. We can tackle the core problems that keep them away, like offering financial support to their families, educating communities on the importance of schooling for girls, and creating financial opportunities for women that prove the true power of an education. A board member, Dr. Patricia Chen, nodded with a look of approval. What scale of investment are we discussing? $5 billion over 10 years, which is enough to provide full educational programs for more than 2 million girls worldwide. A low hum of excitement filled the room. This was a massive proposal, even for the Wellington Foundation. But this is what sets our plan apart from other educational programs, Sarah went on. Each girl we educate will become a champion for the next generation. We are not simply building schools, we are building a worldwide network of educated women who will stand up for their own daughters, their own communities, and their own countries. Margaret Wellington raised her hand. Sarah, this is precisely the kind of visionary approach your mother would have championed in this work. How will we define success? We will measure it over generations, Sarah answered. When a girl gets an education, her own children are 6 times more likely to get an education too. When women have ways to earn their own money, rates of domestic violence fall sharply. When mothers are educated, the rates of infant death drop significantly. We are not just transforming single lives, we are altering the course of entire societies. The board held a vote, and the initiative was approved unanimously. After the meeting concluded, Sarah strolled through the Foundation's corridors with Elizabeth, who had to stop and look at every single photograph and award displayed on the walls. Mama, is great-grandma Elizabeth in these photos? Elizabeth asked, gesturing toward a wall of family pictures. In some of them, yes, Sarah replied, getting down to her daughter's eye level. Do you want to see which one is my favorite? They went over to the portrait hanging in the main hall, showing Elizabeth Wellington Mitchell on her college graduation day, her smile shining with potential and hope. She looks just like you, Mama. People often say that you look like her, too. Will I get to help people, just like you and great-grandma Elizabeth? Sarah gathered her daughter into a hug, taking in the sweet smell of her shampoo and feeling amazed by the amount of joy this little girl brought her. Only if that is what you want to do, my dear, you can grow up to be anything you want. I want to help people, the way you do. Then that is what you will do, but you have to learn as much as you can first. You must stay curious about the world and always be kind to every person you meet. Do you think you can do that? Yes, Mama. On their way to the exit, they went past the Foundation's research labs, where science teams were developing projects that would improve millions of lives. They walked by the Education Center, where students on scholarships were studying for careers that would pull their families from poverty. They continued past the Crisis Intervention Center, where skilled counselors were helping women get away from abusive situations and start over. All of this is here because of your great-grandmother, Sarah explained to Elizabeth as the elevator took them down to the parking garage. She was convinced that having wealth was pointless without a purpose. She felt that having privilege also meant you had a duty. What is a duty, Mama? It means that if you are in a position to help someone, you should do it, not because you are forced to, but because it is the good and right thing to do. That night, Sarah put Elizabeth to bed in the very room her own mother had slept in as a girl. The room had been updated with bright, happy colors and furniture just her size, but the feeling of the space was the same. It was a place where a brilliant woman had dreamed about making the world a better place. Mama, can you tell me the story about the scared lady at the bank? Elizabeth asked, just like she did almost every night. It had turned into their special bedtime story, the one about how Sarah found her real family and her own inner strength. Elizabeth loved hearing about the day her mama wasn't scared anymore and became brave instead. Once upon a time, Sarah started, getting comfortable in the rocking chair next to Elizabeth's bed, there was a woman who believed she was not special at all. She was with a man who constantly told her she was weak and had no value. And for a long time, she believed him. But she was not weak, Elizabeth chimed in, right on cue. No, she certainly was not. She just had not realized it yet. One day this woman was at a bank, trying to get answers about some money, and her husband became furious. He shoved her. He did, but a very kind man at the bank witnessed what happened and noticed something familiar about the woman. He realized she was part of a family that had been searching for her for many, many years. A family that had a lot of money. A family that had a lot of love, Sarah corrected in a soft voice. The money was only a way for them to help others. The family itself. That was the real fortune. And what happened after that? Then the woman discovered that she was not weak at all. She found out she came from a long family line of very strong women who used what they had to improve the world. She realized she could help other women who felt scared the same way she used to feel. And she had a wonderful baby girl. She did, and that little girl grew up always knowing she was loved, that she was strong, and that she could accomplish anything she wanted to. Elizabeth yawned and burrowed deeper under her blankets. Mama, when I am big, I want to help scared ladies too. I am sure you will, my love. I am sure you will help so many people. As Elizabeth fell asleep, Sarah stayed in the rocking chair a while longer, glancing around the room where her mother had once had her own dreams for the future. On the bedside table was a picture of 4 generations of Wellington women, her great-grandmother, her grandmother, her mother, herself, and Elizabeth. They were powerful women who had created something that would last, women who had used their position to build opportunities for other people, women who knew that real wealth is not counted in dollars, but in the lives you better and the positive changes you create. Through the window, the property was dark, but in the distance, Sarah could see the lights from the foundation's buildings. Tomorrow, those buildings would be filled with people trying to fix problems, discover solutions, and open new doors. Teachers would be preparing to work in schools in poor villages. Scientists would be creating new ways to get clean water. Counselors would be getting ready to help women leave terrible situations. All of it paid for by a family who understood the importance of privilege and the happiness that comes from having a purpose. Sarah's thoughts turned to Richard, who was now in the middle of a 15-year sentence for financial crimes and domestic assault. She almost never thought of him anymore, but when she did, she felt a sense of gratitude that his cruel, self-serving abuse was what led her to find her true family and her life's mission. She pictured the frightened, pregnant woman who had been shoved in a bank lobby 7 years in the past, and she smiled. That woman had found her people. That woman had found her power. That woman had made a difference in the world. Getting up from the rocking chair, Sarah leaned down to kiss her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Sweet dreams, Elizabeth. Tomorrow we are going to keep on changing the world." As she switched off the lamp and quietly shut the door, Sarah felt a deep connection to all the Wellington women who had lived before her and to the promise of those who would follow. They were creating something together, something that would exist long after they were all gone, something that would transform the world, one person at a time, for many generations. Outside, the stars twinkled above the Wellington estate, watching over a legacy of generosity, power, and service that would go on as long as there were people who needed a hand and women who were courageous enough to offer it. The Elizabeth Wellington Initiative had started with a single, scared woman's drive to help others, and had become an international powerhouse for good, and it was just getting started. In meeting rooms and schools all over the globe, women were finding their own inner power, their own value, and their own ability to change not just their own situations, but the situations of so many others. The frightened woman in the bank had risen to lead a movement. The helpless victim had transformed into a force for change. The lonely wife had become the head of a family committed to helping others succeed. And in a little bedroom in the Hudson Valley, a 7-year-old girl was sleeping soundly, dreaming about the day she would take up the torch and carry it into the future. And she would keep building the world her great-grandmother had dreamed of, a world where every single woman understood her value, embraced her power, and used her abilities to help other women do the exact same thing. The foundation they had created together would stand the test of time. The lives they had transformed would cause a ripple effect that would reach millions more, and the heritage of love, bravery, and mission would live on as long as there were people who believed that wealth without empathy was empty, but that wealth, guided by love, could truly change everything. This was the way of the Wellingtons. This was the result of women empowering other women. This is what unfolds when a person finally realizes that their true power is not in what they can get for themselves, but in what they can offer to the world. And it all began with a single shove, a single act of cruelty that uncovered a truth that was too big to stay hidden. Sometimes the most terrible thing that ever happens to you is the very thing that sparks the greatest chapter of your life. Sarah Elizabeth Wellington. Mitchell had reconnected with her family, accepted her inheritance, and created a legacy that would last forever. But the most valuable lesson she learned was how to help other people discover their own power, their own value, and their own ability to change the world. And that kind of treasure was worth more than every dollar in the world. And that's Sarah's story. But here's what I want you to take away today. Your circumstances do not define your worth. The people who try to control you, diminish you, or make you feel small, they do not get to decide who you become. Sarah spent 8 years believing she was weak because someone kept telling her she was. The moment she stopped believing his lies, she discovered a strength that had been inside her all along. If you're watching this and you feel trapped, if someone has made you believe you have no options, please know this: there is always a way forward. There are always people who will help. And your story is far from over. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own strength, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change your perspective. Drop a comment below and tell me, what moment in Sarah's journey resonated with you the most? Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening until the end. Your time means everything to us. This content was carefully researched, crafted, and manually edited by our team to bring meaningful lessons and inspiration to your life. Every story we share is designed to uplift, empower, and remind you of the strength you carry within. Until next time, remember, your real wealth isn't what you have, it's who you help become.